Started. Hello, welcome. Thank you for joining us for our recurring Systems for Action Research and Progress webinar series, where we feature innovative research being conducted through the Systems for Action program. I'm Carrington Lott. I'm the Deputy Director at Systems for Action. And if you're not familiar with Systems for Action, we are a national research program office funded by the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, and we're housed at the Colorado School of Public Health. We at the Systems for Action National Research Program Office study ways of aligning medical, social, and public health systems to address health equity for communities across the country. And in this webinar series that we host, we profile studies going on through the program at different points in their research studies so that we can learn alongside with the researchers in real time what they're learning through their work. Today is a special session as we're hearing from the System Alignment Innovation Hub. We designed the Innovation Hub a couple of years ago to create more space for non-research organizations like community-based organizations to engage in our research program addressing systems alignment issues. The Innovation Hub's been up and running for about 2 years now, and today is an extra special treat because you're going to be hearing from their first cohort of grantees. You're going to be hearing from, they have 4 grantees in their cohort. Today, you're going to be hearing from 2 of them. So this is part 1 of a 2-part webinar series. Part 2 will take place next Wednesday, August 14th. I believe my colleague, Sadina Belmashkan, is going to drop a link in the chat so that you can register for that if you're interested in hearing the other 2 grantees present on their work as well. A few housekeeping items. Today's session will be recorded, and we will send out follow-up communication with recording as well as the slides. And we will also reserve some time at the end of today's webinar session for questions and answers. If any questions come up at any point during the webinar session, please locate the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom screen and enter in your question, and we'll make sure that we save time at the end of both presentations to address those questions. I think one thing that might be helpful if you're thinking about it as you might enter your questions is that we are going to be hearing from 2 different teams today. So if you could indicate which team your question is for, I think that would make it a little bit easier on our end so that we can address the question to the correct individuals. With that, I'm going to conclude my welcome. Thank you for joining. I'm going to hand it over to LaMont Green, who is one of the leaders of the System Alignment Innovation Hub, and he will do a little bit more in-depth introduction of the grantees and the Innovation Hub itself. So with that, please take it away, Lamont.
Thank you so much, Carrington. It is so wonderful to be here. My name is Lamont Green, and I'm the director of the Systems Alignment Innovation Hub. And I'm also here with my colleague, Lori. Lori, you want to say hi?
Aloha, everyone.
And so what we're going to do is we're going to share a little bit about the framework that we are using with grantees. Next slide.
Hi, Lamont. I think you're coming through a little garbled in the audio. Is that just me?
Next slide. So my intro is probably sorry about that. Can folks hear me better?
Yes.
We can hear your audio. Maybe go and turn off your
Still
camera.
breaking up? Hold on real quick. Okay, let's see. Is that better?
There we go.
Yes.
Thank you, Lamont.
Testing.
We're good.
Okay, my apologies. My internet acting up at the wrong time. And so, so the framework we've been using with our grantees called equity-centered community design. And this is a hybrid model developed by me and my colleague, Nastasia Moore at TAC, taking human-centered design and integrating approaches developed by the Creative Action Lab, the People's Institute for Survival and Beyond, and other approaches grounded in implementation science. So we created this hybrid, taking some of the best tools to really help communities in developing their health innovation research idea. And equity-centered, it's based on equity, humility building, and integrating history and healing practices to design effective solutions with communities most impacted really leading and driving that alongside system partners. Like I mentioned earlier, equity-centered community design evolved from human-centered design and plays a crucial role today in developing healthcare innovations. And so some things that equity-centered community design focuses on, that's kind of an evolution from human-centered design, is inclusive representation and power sharing by communities most impacted leading or co-leading the process. So it's really shifting the model of development where those most impacted are driving and leading the process alongside system partners. And in this way, it helps to really build community power. It also addresses systems of oppression. Equity-centered community design acknowledges systemic inequalities and oppression by really examining power dynamics and the historical context. It aims to dismantle those barriers and really create more equitable outcomes. And it's also a very flexible approach. It recognizes that the real world issues, many of these, grand challenges and complex social issues are non-linear, and it requires approaches that are adaptable when addressing these various challenges. And my favorite is it focuses on community well-being. It's very much a humanizing approach. It focuses on community health and well-being. It creates space for people to get a sense of their own power, and it fosters greater understanding, and it promotes systemic change in pursuit of equity. And so our grantees are using the community equity-centered community design with folks most impacted by their grand challenge, coming together with system partners, public health, medical sector, social services, and others to come up with an innovation or idea, and then developing a research design plan to test that idea and measure its impact. And in that process, launching a proof of concept or pilot study to conduct continuous quality improvement to understand and refine their idea so that we could really move the needle in population level health. And so equity-centered community design is one part, and the other part that's really critical framework we're using is a decolonization and indigenization framework. And so my sister and co-conspirator Lori is going to share a bit about that.
Thank you, Brother LaMont, my brother in liberation. Aloha, mai kako. I am one of the humbled and honored supporters to the community leaders and researchers who you will hear from today. I'm a Kanaka Maoli, more familiar to you as a native Hawaiian. I also identify as Filipina, a daughter of an immigrant where our family is descendant of the Mandela Muslim clan. I share that with you as part of my identity and then bringing into this space and the work around the Systems Alignment Innovation Hub with this quote from James Baldwin, which is one of my favorite quotes from him. He says, "There is a reason, after all, that some people wish to colonize the moon and others dance before it as an ancient friend." James Baldwin was diagnosing a fundamental imbalance in our collective psyche. And for me, reading that quote through the lens of our modern struggles that we are all facing, it says to me, it's not just about the moon, it's about how we approach life itself. And so our journey as a Systems Alignment Innovation Hub includes a pledge for truth over comfort. We understand that colonization shows up in our world every day. And together, we identify those dominant voices, those perspectives and narratives that often shape our mainstream strategies, how we do research, and best practices. And then once we identify those dominant voices, we decenter them. And we decenter that in order to amplify the voices and experiences and learnings and histories of people who are often erased in our framework for racial justice and social impact change. So just like we apply Western methodologies to address the problem we are solving, how could we use local knowledge systems, lived experience, ancient and indigenous ways of knowing to solve that same problem? This is an opportunity to understand how different ways of knowing and doing can be perceived, presented, and practiced as equal to Western ways of knowing and doing, and more importantly, equally valued. So this is an opportunity for the projects and efforts you are about to hear from. They are going to be an active and integral in being part of a decolonization movement for political liberation, for systems alignment and transformation, and the development of an economic system that serves rather than threatens our collective life on this planet. Standing within this framework of equity-centered community design and decolonization is a team of folks that is not all represented here that you're going to see on camera, but just want to shout out the team of Rachel and Lamar, Nilofer, Nastasia, and Terry, who have been working with our practice-based organizations, our community organizations. I am so excited that you will be hearing from Community ConneXor today and the Mandela Yoga. I believe that you will walk away from this time with them inspired and filled with gratitude, knowing that we have these beautiful souls that are building a local movement. I'd like to bring into this space and welcome now Ms. Vickie Harris and Dr. James Muchira with Community ConneXor to share about their project.
Morning. Thank you for that introduction. And thank you for the opportunity to showcase the Asset Initiative, Accelerated, Accountable, Strategic, Sustainable, Equity-Centered Transformation. We are based in Nashville, Tennessee. Next slide, please. To tell you a little bit about Community ConneXor, our mission is to serve communities by delivering innovative, sustainable solutions that connect, improve, and transform how social and healthcare agencies together deliver holistic, person-centric care and services at that community level. Our two service components includes the Community Resource Marketplace, that is a technology-enabled, emerging community care hub, and our Rooted Together Village Aging and Community program that focuses on older adults and their connectivity to resources and navigation services in the North Nashville area. Next slide, please. My name is Vickie Harris. I'm the founder and CEO of Community ConneXor. And joining me in the work with the Asset Initiative is Dr. James Muchira, Assistant Professor at the Vanderbilt School of Nursing, a cardiovascular and SDOH researcher. We are also joined with a planning and research team that represents 7 additional African Americans and 3 whites on our team, and also 4 minority-owned small businesses. And I must say that minority-owned is actually female-owned small businesses. Next slide. So we're called to this space at this time using a quote from a well-known politician, Representative John Lewis, who actually was part of the civil rights movement in Nashville at one of the 4 HBCUs here in Nashville. His quote was, "If not us, then who? If not now, then when?" Next slide. So using data and also information gained from being in the community in Nashville, Tennessee, our grand challenge that we've defined at a micro community level, but at a macro level within that micro community, it is systemic racial drivers of fragmentation in human and social services funding, service delivery, the underinvestment that perpetuates the inequities and continuously undermines health and well-being. So as you can see, this is more than just funding at the individual level for services. This is about those social determinants of health and the systemic issues that underpin our ability to actually make significant sustainable progress. Next slide. So in defining the grand challenge for the asset initiative, we took a step back in history to understand the why. There were 3 historical markers that we identified or are drivers of our current situation in Nashville, particularly North Nashville, which is predominantly African American. It was first redlining. The second one was the civil rights movement, which seems a little bit odd. And the third one was Interstate 40. So let me just kind of set the stage. So redlining actually forced African Americans to live in the northern part of Davidson County, Nashville, Tennessee. What they were able to create was a vibrant community with 4 historically Black colleges and universities, stores, entertainment district, hotels. It was the home to professionals at the African American institutions. So it was a thriving community, but it was segregated in the northern part of Davidson County. Then came along the civil rights movement. And as we all know, the Civil Rights Act was passed in 1965. But what happened was that the civil rights movement in Nashville, Davidson County was actually born out of the students at the 4 HBCUs, particularly Tennessee State University. So while the Civil Rights Act was passed in 1965, and one would think that we would have a strong tailwind behind Interstate 40 construction, and delaying Interstate 40 construction through the North Nashville community and disrupting the business section. This had been a conversation that had been ongoing for years. However, this case made it to the Supreme Court, and post Civil Rights Act, the decision was made by the Supreme Court that the Interstate 40 construction through the business district of North Nashville could continue, even though there was a more disruptive route available. Not only did it make one pass through the North Nashville community, it made 2 passes through the North Nashville community. Many local leaders and individuals from that period believed that this was political retaliation. So even though we had the Civil Rights Act passed in 65, in 1967, we lost at the Supreme Court to stop the construction through the business district. What we saw was the destruction of homes, apartments, churches, housing values declined, businesses were closed, and the entire community suffered. And so we saw that happen. And so those are the 3 historical markers that really set the stage for the health disparities that we are continuing to try to focus on today in overcoming. Next slide. At this point, I will turn it over to Dr. Muchira to give you some data points, qualitative data points as to why North Nashville.
Thank you, Ms. Vickie, for giving that background and the historical perspective of our grand challenge. Again, my name is James Muchira. I'm an assistant professor and a researcher in the social determinants of health and chronic conditions. And my work right now is to take you through the grand challenge and some of the reasons why we're talking about the North Nashville area. So our project is focused on 3 zip codes, and we call it the North Nashville or the North Nashville border area. And just to show you from the data points here, the 3 zip codes, District 1, 2, and 3, they are predominantly composed of the Black African American populations, actually more than a half, close to even 3/4. And these communities, they do face significant social economic challenges, as you can see, per capita income, which are substantially lower than the county average, which is the Davidson County. you can see like District 2, the per capita income is just 28,000 per year. And just to bring this in context, in this district, 45% of the renters are paying actually more than 35% of their income in rent. So most of even if they are earning, you know, the earnings are substantially low, even their income is spent mostly in the rental to paying rent. In addition, the neighborhood has substantial or notable proportion of children who are under 18 years. I just wanted to highlight that. Look at District 2, which is 15.8 of the population being children under 18 years. So what this means is there is a critical need to support even this younger generation, because we might see future prospects of these young adults who probably will inherit some of these socioeconomic challenges to their adulthood and probably even to their children. Next slide, please. So I mentioned we are focusing on this area in North Nashville, which is called the North Nashville Bordeaux area. And it's interesting that in many cities in the country, there is always somewhere where you experience several challenges. And these challenges are not just by, you know, it's by it usually comes not just by chance, it's by, I would say, by design sometimes. And Ms. Vickie has given you the historical challenges that this region has witnessed. And no matter then, we see in this area in North Nashville, we are experiencing the highest rates of significant socioeconomic challenges and health challenges, including the highest rates of food insecurity, chronic diseases, mental health issues, and highest rates of mortality in this area. And it begs the question of why then food insecurity, why chronic conditions, why mental health illnesses in this area? As I told you, my work is in social determinants of health, and it's interesting that most of these very high upstream factors that Ms. Vickie has mentioned earlier at the systemic level, they do get to the, people talk about getting under the skin in many ways. And one of the ways that we see some of the outcomes from the historical disadvantage in this region is chronic conditions, mental health illnesses, and very, very high mortality rates in this region. So I just wanted to highlight that due to what has happened historically in this region, the residents, and as I present these numbers, I always want to mention these are real people that are experiencing this food insecurity. They have chronic conditions and all these other challenges we are mentioning. So next slide, please. So when we're talking about the lack of access to resources, chronic conditions, one thing that is at the center of all this is poverty. So poverty is the driving force behind the food insecurity, the mental illnesses, and all the other outcomes, health outcomes that are associated with poverty. So to effectively address these challenges that are facing this North Nashville Bordeaux area, we must recognize that poverty and other social determinants of health factors are interrelated. And this poverty, all these factors you see, lack of access to resources, work opportunities, housing, transportation, health education, systemic racism, and all these other factors, they are really interrelated, and the poverty is at the center of it. So by aligning our efforts across all these sectors, and that is what we intend to do, We want to intend to align our efforts across all these sectors, be it health, education, community, investment, housing, to create a holistic approach that tackles the root causes of poverty and promotes sustainable health and economic mobility. So we want to make sure that we are addressing several aspects of this web of causation. We want to address the root causes of poverty, promote sustainable health and economic mobility. This cross-sector system alignment is essential for making transformative changes in this community by ensuring that all residents have the resources and support needed to thrive. Next slide, please. Yeah, at this point, I will let Ms. Vickie to continue with the presentation.
So the call to action. The call to action goes back to the slide related to the John Lewis quote. If not us, then who? If not now, then when? Because the work has already been started. The foundation has been laid from the activities of the from the redlining, where we built a vibrant community, to actually trying to address civil rights issues and health equity in the 60s with the Civil Rights Act. So this is the new call to action: accelerated, accountable, strategic, sustainable, equity-centered transformation, building on the work that has already been done. The asset call to action was actually a call to the community, a call to the cross-sector organizations to let's have a different conversation. Let's upend the status quo that does not seem to be moving the needle in a sustainable way around health equity. Let's create new pathways together, not separately, not with the organizations creating plans and then bringing them to the community in a rubber stamp way, but let's set the table together. And Dr. Muchira and I identified 3 strategic priorities, looking at the data and also being in community. One is empowerment of community, that whatever we move forward with the Assets Initiative had to have empowerment of the community at its very center and nature. The second priority was streamlining and coordinated access and service delivery, whether that was human and social services, whether that was access to healthcare services, whether that was access to workforce development services, whatever that was, that it needs to be streamlined, because that's not the design that we currently have. What we have is a scattershot approach to all services. The third strategic priority was accountable reversible of the underinvestment. Because of this area and who it was, who occupied the space and the land, from redlining all the way to the decision about Interstate 40, there has been underinvestment in this area. And now, as a result of that redlining and the Interstate 40 driving the value of land down, we now have unprecedented growth in Nashville, and that low value land certainly now has great value. So now the community of North Nashville is challenged with gentrification and actually working against the clock in many instances. So that was the call to action, is to come to the table, let's have a different conversation, and let's co-create new pathways. Next slide, please. So the Asset Initiative adopted the equity-centered community design framework, but also simultaneously adopted the Georgia Health Policy System Framework for Alignment for Health. Merged those two together to say, let's focus on community empowerment and simultaneously cross-sector alignment. So let's bring the human and social service organizations to the table and healthcare with the community. And so those are our two frameworks as strategic guide rails for the work of the Asset Initiative. Next slide. So we have been very intentional. We call it asset for a reason, because as you can see from the title, it is about assets. It's building on what has already been started in the North Nashville area by those who went before us. We are just picking up and building on that. And so we developed some criteria for what we refer to as stewards. And stewards are folks who have already demonstrated that they have an affinity for North Nashville, for its culture, its people, and all that it represents. We also felt that it was important that our advisory stewards who would come to the table already had a belief that only together, not as separate entities, not as community alone, but that together we can best co-create a cross-sector plan that transforms health and well-being across the North Nashville community. And our third criteria was that these folks that would come to the table to help co-create a plan for health equity improvement in North Nashville, that they would have already demonstrated an ongoing commitment to alignment, to inclusiveness, to community leadership, and knowledge sharing. And so it's together we have brought to the Asset Board of Advisory Stewards the community representatives from various neighborhood associations from the North Nashville area, as well as a cross-sector of organizations who work and intersect with individuals that live in the North Nashville area. They have demonstrated this affinity for North Nashville and have already demonstrated that they are focused on health equity improvement. Next slide. So we have two subgroups, but they make up one board of advisory stewards. So it is with the human and social service organizations, healthcare organizations, but with community voice at the table with these organizations. We have 6 neighborhood associations who enthusiastically agreed to come to the table. We also have 3 community organizers who work across multiple community coalitions relative to North Nashville. So we have 9 individuals who are at the Board of Advisory Stewards table to co-create the asset plan. Because community empowerment is so key to the success of the Asset Initiative, we've spent additional time focused on what are the community empowerment strategic approaches. So it's not just the Board of Advisory Stewards and asking each of these neighborhood associations to send in a representative, but it's also roundtable roadshows and dedicated web page. Next slide. So this is representative of the cross-sector organization. So we've got the health systems, we got the public health system, and we've got the community-based human social service organizations at the table. This is what I call Nashville's best at the table, a cross-section of Nashville's best. Next slide. So our first advisory steward meeting, this is a question that the advisory steward answered. What aspects of North Nashville makes it an asset and should be elevated in the future? So this is a word cloud we created from the responses from the Board of Advisory Stewards. And so you can see the foundation for systems alignment. We see all of these comments, these elements, assets being critical. Next slide. So our next steps, turn it back over to Dr. Muchira.
So thank you, Ms. Vickie. So as Ms. Vickie has highlighted, we have managed to have one advisory steward meeting, the first one, which was the inaugural meeting, and it was very successful and vibrant, I must tell you. And So what we have started to do is having these kind of listening sessions, kind of looking at the grand challenge. So the next steps are a consensus to achieve a consensus of the grand challenge, and then develop potential solutions and prioritize them based on the impact and feasibility. Then we also aim to reach a consensus on one solution to pilot, and then review the prototype, logic model, and implementation plan for the pilot, and then finalize and prepare to pilot the prototype and develop an implementation plan. So that's the next step. So we really want to make sure that we have this structured approach to addressing the grand challenge that will be agreed upon, focusing on collaborative decision-making, strategic planning, and effective implementation. Ms. Vickie.
Yes, and then we've developed some minimum solutions criteria that's cross-sector, person-centric, holistic, trifecta, addressing at least 3 social determinants of health, and leverages existing assets with intentional focus on organizations owned or led by people of color and innovative system thinking. Next slide. So we want to thank you for the opportunity to share with you our progress to date with the Asset Initiative in Nashville, Davidson County, Tennessee. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wow, that was amazing. Y'all, let's just give some love to Community ConneXor. Thank you so much, Vickie and James. That was truly, truly amazing. All right, so it is my pleasure, y'all. And is my sound coming through? Hopefully I'm not breaking up now. Oh, the internet's breaking up again. So I'm gonna go off camera. Internet always breaks up at the wrong time. But it is my pleasure to introduce you all to Jeffrey and Richa with Mandela Yoga. Mandela Yoga envisions a world where those affected by the American public health crisis of racism and the soul injury to individuals and communities created by racism, intersecting with other forms of oppression, that we, those most impacted, we have the power to heal ourselves and our community through culturally resonant yoga practices, which has proven health benefits in decreasing cortisol levels, blood pressure, and numerous other health benefits by improving overall health and well-being. And you all, I could be an evangelist for Mandela Yoga. We had a grantee retreat in Boston a few months ago, and they treated us by doing the Sonia sequence. And I was amazed. I was always curious about yoga, but in my neighborhood, it seemed like I wouldn't fit in, as a Black man. And they did some yoga practices with us, and I was like, wow, my nervous system felt calm. It was amazing. And so now I wish we had a Mandela Yoga in my own community, but now I'm determined to really deepen my practice. So I'm going to hand it over to Brother Jeffrey and Sister Richa and Tori to share about their amazing project.
Hush. Hush. Somebody is calling my name. Hush. Hush. Somebody is calling my name. Oh, my Lord. Oh, my Lord. What shall I do? What shall I do? My name is Jeffrey Thomas. I am the son of Charles Thomas from Bruton, Alabama, and Mary Rivers Thomas from the Low Country of Charleston, South Carolina. I was born in 1963 in Mississippi. And that year, 60 Black churches were bombed because they were acting in response to racial oppression. Oh my Lord, what shall I do? And when I was growing up, other responses that I saw is that across the street from an abandoned public housing development, I'm sorry, across the street from a public housing development was an abandoned supermarket. Well, they took that supermarket and converted it into a Head Start center serving more than 200 children. When they noticed that there were not financial services being offered to people of color, they created a Black bank. So then it came to me 10 years ago when I was in a group medical visit, diabetic, high blood pressure, and I added a certain kind of yoga to my health regimen to try to get my diabetes and high blood pressure under control. At the same time, my sister, Sonia, who together, both diabetic, for 15 years, we had traded strategies to get our diabetes under control. Nothing had ever worked until I added yoga. And at the same time, my sister was in end stage renal failure, and she died of complications of diabetes. And so I said, what can I do to make the kind of yoga that helped me available to curvy Black women like my sister? And that led to the inquiry that brought us to the creation of Mandela Yoga. It turned out in my own family, of my father's 8 children, 3 of us are diabetic, 2 bipolar, 1 asthmatic. So that as I learned about inequities in racial health outcomes, it seemed like those disparities were represented in my family. And so I imagined that whatever we came up with could possibly be a solution. And that's how we ended up with Mandela Yoga. So we didn't know we were doing community-centered design when we assembled a team of people of color across healthcare and the contemplative practices and yoga and community organizations. We didn't know that was equity-centered design, but our belief was that people in economic poverty, it's not evidence that there's a paucity of creativity, of imagination. So we imagined a solution which we are happy to share with you today. Today on this centennial of James Baldwin, August 2nd, he would have been 100 years old. And this is our answer to if not who, no, it's us. And the time is now. So we're really thrilled to be among this cohort of very creative grantees. And I will turn over the next slide to my colleague, Richa.
Jeffrey, thank you so much. It is a total honor to be here. I'm Richa Gawande. I'm a research scientist with the Center for Mindfulness and Compassion at Cambridge Health Alliance, and collaborator with Jeffrey and Tori and Julia, and also the folks you saw pictured in the first slide, Felipe, Max, Kiona, and our other co-creators. And I just wanted to acknowledge our ancestors here, our lineage ancestors, all those who have inspired us and whose support we are most definitely being carried by, lifted by. And just to name Julia Naganuma Carreras, Tori Blot, and then me, Richa, and Jeffrey, we're your research team here for this work, and Tori, Jeffrey, and I will be presenting. So our grand challenge is, yeah, next slide, please. And thank you, Rachel, for doing the slides. Yeah, so we are responding to the following. Our Mandela Yoga intervention is to heal the disparities in physical, psycho-spiritual, and community health. So all 3 among people of color. In addition to reverse, so not just address, but reverse and then reimagine collaboratively the systems that have historically exploited bodies of color and voices, suppressed and silenced voices, so that people of color become architects and authors of their own health. I'll turn it back over to you, Jeffrey. Next slide, please.
I had to figure out how to unmute myself. We began our work when a variety of public health associations, medical associations, psychological associations were declaring racism a public health crisis. And so we designed our approach to be part of the solution, again, led by people of color, so that all of the folks engaged in Mandela Yoga in our work we bring in and collaborate specifically with people of color, whether it's within our organization or and also with the collaborators across systems, the champions. We had tried to identify people of color who have some experience with racial oppression, have some lived experience, and a racial analysis that says that something should be done about it. Next slide, please. So LaMont mentioned what was true of my sister, that there were no yoga studios where people of color could feel comfortable. And here we see a 10-year-old slide from Boston, where the areas in green that you can see are areas of high income, and then the red dots that you can see are where there are the greatest concentrations of morbidity and mortality due to chronic health conditions. And there are just too few yoga studios in communities that experienced what we call public health crisis communities. The communities experience the greatest disparities in health outcomes. So we had to figure out a solution to make the kind of yoga available to others who are struggling with chronic health conditions. And that's what we've attempted to do. Next slide, please.
So we heard so poignantly from Dr. Muchira and Ms. Vickie about the complex intersections of poverty, racism, and health in Tennessee. And to try to speak to the health disparities and the profound impact on physical health, psychological health, social, community health, spiritual health, it's actually kind of overwhelming. It's a large task. And I just want to name that there is work to be done in this struggle of capturing and bringing to light health disparities, as well as in communicating their impact. And so here we've tried to do that with what's most relevant for Mandela Yoga, but just know that there's a lot in this web. And so I'll just say a couple points. First, the point is there's a lot of health disparities in rates of diagnosis, outcomes, treatment, access, and cost. People of color tend to be at higher risk and have lower rates of control for almost every chronic health condition, physical and mental. That includes diabetes, hypertension, obesity, and heart disease, as well as anxiety and depression. And chronic diseases, specifically diabetes and hypertension, prematurely claim the lives. This is mortality, not just morbidity, of Blacks at twice the rate of whites. So 37.8% versus almost 19%. This is a crisis at so many levels, including for the health systems and the payer systems, very, very, very costly. So not just the cost of human life, which really should be the only thing that we need to respond, but the economic costs. So 1 in 4 healthcare dollars goes to care for people with diabetes, and costs are almost always higher. Treatment is less available in low-income neighborhoods. And so diabetes is a good example. So we're just drawing that out, and just to show that POC tend to have higher prevalence of diabetes and worse outcomes. And so we're focusing our work on chronic health conditions, including those that affect those who are most vulnerable, including diabetes. So I'll turn it over to Tori.
Next slide, please. So Mandela Yoga's mission. The Mandela Yoga Project was named for Nelson Mandela, who transcended his circumstance and championed racial reconciliation. And the mission of MYP is to scale the delivery of a new system of free, gentle yoga designed for all bodies, designed by people of color to address stress, racial trauma, and chronic health conditions. Also, to be implemented in public health crisis communities by residents who are well-trained and well-compensated peer facilitators. And we just wanted to highlight a quote from one of these peer facilitators that we felt was very impactful. We are all related, from the 5 to 10% who survived, just like all the roots in the earth. We just connected like that. Even if we might not know our history or if we don't remember the why, but our bodies remember, our DNA knows. It's almost like an urgency of giving the hand that we were hoping to receive that never came. Next slide, please. The services offered by Mandela Yoga Project. Mandela Yoga Project collaborates with health centers and public health systems serving primarily Black and Brown people with lived experience of racism and chronic health conditions, and/or are affected by homelessness and incarceration. MYP offers a culturally relevant, trauma-informed Mandela Yoga intervention designed to support chronic illness, stress reduction, and trauma healing, agency, and belonging for people of color. We have conducted 6 initial pilots in health, residential, and reentry settings. Recent pilots use participatory research process for the implementations, which are co-designed, conducted, and disseminated by the wisdom of people of color. A participant from one of the community health centers that we did an implementation stated, "I felt a different world during this session. With my eyes closed, I felt like being in a garden, walking peacefully with my God." Next slide, please.
This is just to underscore that we are the people. When I say we, I mean not just the peer facilitators whose quote you heard, but also the staff of Mandela Yoga. Our staff is entirely people of color with lived experience with racial oppression. Our board members, we currently have a board of 4, 3 of whom are people of color. We'll soon be expanding it to 6, including someone who's formerly incarcerated and in recovery, who's a residential recovery manager and a person of color. And then we'll be adding a resident, a medical resident who's also African American. And among our implementation partners, some of whose faces you'll see, again, we specifically look for champions in our system collaborators who are also people of color who are working to address racial health disparities. Next slide, please. So here you'll see our, well, of course, we're the social service partner here. And you'll see the Chief Public Health Officer for Cambridge, an African-American who's been practicing, turned out had been practicing yoga for 17 years. And he has invited us, as we get further along in this process, to bring our community members who have been participants in Mandela Yoga and who've been peer facilitators to various community and policymaking fora to ensure that their voices are not only heard, but that their recommendations are heard and considered for adoption. And then, of course, our health system partners who you can see there, a safety net hospital, with 14 community health centers embedded in the communities that economic poverty that we wish to collaborate with, and where we are focusing our work. And again, economic poverty doesn't mean a paucity of wisdom. We're also partnering with an accountable care organization that funds 23 of the 53 health centers across the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And with both of these system partners, in health system partners, we are collecting data, which is a marked difference from before. Our previous pilots have been self-reported data by our participants, but now we're moving to collect health data with an accountable care organization, as well as with a hospital system. Next slide, Richa.
So our solution, this is a quote from the CDC. This is a paper about basically analyzing the state of diabetes today for POC. And this was their recommendation. We suggest healthcare professionals create culturally tailored interventions that aid individuals in educating others, advocating for themselves, or recognizing situations outside one's control and detaching from responsibility, rather than internalizing experiences of discrimination or engaging in strong responses that, upon reflection, are detrimental to one's health. So we feel that our intervention that was co-created by the community for the community is responsive to this call. And just to illustrate this point, one of our participants who later became a Mandela Yoga peer facilitator apprentice has said it like this, and please excuse my Spanish. Respirando es vida y life es breathing y previene lastimarnos. Breathing is life and life is breathing and prevents us from getting hurt. And maybe we could all just take one breath together right now. Good, thank you. All right, next slide, please.
So breathing is paired with movement is the key to the Mandela Yoga intervention. LaMont, if only there were time for us to do the full 45 minutes practice. It's 45 minutes, it's standardized, it's peer-led, and you can see here under the different categories, the various components. And hopefully sharing this poster with you helps you to see. Before creating this poster, I never seen people of color on a yoga poster in any studio that I went into in the Western world. So this is one of the things that's that people have responded to as participants, and also this is what people who are peer facilitators use to guide folks through the sequence. They're not 200-hour trained yoga teachers. They're community members who take our 30-hour paid training and learn to be the peer facilitators for the 45-minute standardized sequence, which they've lived within their body for at least 12 weeks, and then they go on to share it. If my sister had shared it, she would have been in her church community room where they do Zumba and where she taught the children's choir and directed it, and she would have used this poster, named for herself, to move folks collectively through the 45-minute standardized sequence. It's evidence-based. We took poses proven in white clinical settings to be effective at addressing these health conditions, and we wondered what would be the impact, whether or not there would be positive improved health outcomes if it were peer-led, taking advantage of the racial and ethnic concordance in health outcomes when the provider and the patient share cultural affinity. And one of the things that makes Mandela Yoga more culturally resonant is that in each setting, each peer facilitator opens and closes with a culturally resonant practice. So the peer facilitator whose quote was used earlier, he will sometimes play his Taino flute. I opened our session with a song from my tradition. And that's essentially, you know, a bit about the Mandela Yoga intervention. I look forward to the opportunity to share it with you all at some point in the future. Richa? Next slide.
So just to briefly talk about the specifics of our solution. So we're using principles of equity-centered design to pilot the implementation of Mandela Yoga combined with a group medical visit at 3 health centers. So these will be 6 or 24, 2 6-week pilots back to back and a 24-week pilot. We're partnering with an accountable care organization to determine collaboratively with patients, providers, and the payer how to collect and share health data in a way that respects patient privacy, but then also allows for an illumination of how the Mandela Yoga intervention is affecting these patients and their communities. We're harnessing participatory methods to do each step of this, so prioritizing community voice to co-design and iteratively design a care delivery in the Mandela Yoga plus group medical visit model. And aligning these 3 systems will help achieve racial equity, and we believe health equity, and will help to progress towards the ultimate goal of not only identifying and reversing, but addressing community needs and goals. And finally, we'll be developing a strategy with public health partners on ways to utilize recommendations of patients of color in their policymaking. Jeffrey, next slide, please.
So for our next steps, Richa has already alluded to them, and you can see them here again. The most important idea is that the way the needle gets moved on health equities is when people of color with chronic health conditions become the architects of the solutions alongside the health system, alongside policymakers. And as a convener, we didn't realize we were doing equity-centered design, but it turns out that that approach is what has gained us the systems partners that we've had. To me, it's unbelievable because when I wanted to make this yoga available, I had no idea we would end up Robert Wood Johnson Foundation grantees, and I had no idea that that we would end up having the kind of health system partners and a public health partner keenly interested in actually utilizing the recommendations of patients of color, born of their own experience, born of the wisdom of their communities and traditions. So I will close us out with this quote. Mandela Yoga helped me to keep myself strong so I wouldn't make those same old choices. I had new tools. Before, I used to think I did not have options. I see my life with Mandela Yoga, I get to breathe. I get to sit back and I understand. And I know that I always have an option. I can always give myself that option, even if I don't get it from the outside. Thank you very much.
Wow, wow, wow. Jeffrey, Richa, Tori, thank you all so much. What you're doing is so inspiring and life-saving work. And there's so much love from folks. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Beautiful, beautiful work. So now we're going to ask all of our wonderful grantee community members if you all are able to come on screen, because we have some questions from our participants. And the first question goes to Community ConneXor, Miss Vickie and James. And someone would like you to share a little bit more about when you talk about building community power. And specifically, they wanted to hear from Miss Vickie. Could you share a little bit more about how to empower community, or some of your thoughts around empowering community?
Certainly. You know, so many times in our observations related to community engagement, it is usually a back-end engagement of community in the process. And I sincerely believe, as do many others who share this belief with me, that if that community actually has a great deal of knowledge and understanding, that we can bring additional knowledge to marry that together. So we've not tried to recreate the wheel, so to speak. We went to existing organizations that are already operating in communities. So our community engagement strategy was not a new convening of community, but actually leveraging existing organizations that were already convened. The neighborhood associations are rich. They are enthusiastic. They are vested in their neighborhoods in that North Nashville area. So we went to their leadership and said, this is what we're trying to do. And we want to work with you. And we want to be a part of that, of your work. And we would like to bring you to the table with a group of cross-sector healthcare organizations, public health organizations to design. So I do think that we need to recognize that communities of color have knowledge and expertise, and it's not just our lived experience that we often go to them and say, tell us what it is that you're experiencing so that we can then go away and design something to fix that for you. They actually want to be at the table, should be at the table, and have invaluable knowledge beyond just their lived experience.
Beautiful. Thank you, Ms. Vickie. Also for Community ConneXor, our participant would like to know, we know that you guys are going along this equity-centered community design process with folks most impacted as system partners, but do you have a sense or a feel on what types of services or what will be the main, because we think about poverty, it's so big, right? Are you guys getting a sense of what your project may end up honing in and focusing in on?
We do have a sense based on some previous work in the community by another coalition, by several other coalition groups, that it likely will be around economic well-being and poverty because they're interrelated. And so there's been a great deal of activity related to economic well-being, which is a significant driver of poverty, particularly in Nashville, with the dynamics related to the unprecedented growth of the city that is actually squeezing people out because of lack of affordability.
And probably just to add on to that is, yeah, the easiest thing would have been just to go in and, start doing some interventions. Because we have the data, we can say, hey, we want to come in and do a health promotion intervention like cardiovascular health or something like that. But then we want to be very, cognizant of the fact that this is a community intervention that the community should own and actually contribute to. So we want to really, as much as we are talking about the health outcomes, all those the data we were presenting, those outcomes, we really want to focus on some interventions like what Ms. Vickie has mentioned, that we will have not just addressing the outcome, but we're actually kind of addressing the costs. What are the economic challenges? What are the uplifting people, community empowerment? So we're thinking kind of like holistic kind of interventions, which we have some in mind, but we are approaching these in with openness, thinking that we might get some additions, and we will get additions from the stewards on what are these some of the most impactful interventions they think that we could use.
Wow, that is excellent, Vickie and Dr. James. And I love what you're saying, that this is community design and community owned. Beautiful. So we're going to move to another question here, and this is for Mandela Yoga. And so One participant would like to know what types of data is being collected by the health system and or accountable community organization, ACO, and have you experienced any pushback from participants that this data is being shared? And then lastly, what type of messaging are you using to simmer fear? So again, what types of data is being collected? Are participants feeling any type of unease or mistrust regarding this data collection, and your messaging that you might be using to help simmer that fear?
I would just call back a slide, I think it's 13, that's entitled Solution, and it lists there the kind of data that's being, keep going, keep going, keep going. Oh, nope, very down the bottom, one of the last, second or third to the last slide. And then I'll let Richa answer that question. Utilizing principles of equity-centered design is how it begins. So one more. Yes.
Yeah, this is great. Thank you, Jeffrey. Yeah, so yeah, there's given the centuries of exploitation and mistreatment in healthcare of bodies of color, the historical and present day mistrust is real. We serve the communities first, and so we work to really, our whole process actually holds this question in the center. And I think that my honest answer is like, I don't know yet, because we have to learn in conversation by conversation by conversation. So first we start with the providers, because the patients haven't come yet, right? In these pilots that we are about to do, so that's where the ACO data is coming into play. And we talk about it. We talk about this is how we can leverage the various power that we have collectively to influence healthcare delivery and policy. And so what would be first of all, what is the benefit to the patients of doing any of this, and talking about that, and then really trying to understand together what are ways to minimize harm and maximize voice, essentially. And so it's more of like, can we hold these values as we go into these conversations? And then of course, consent, right? So being really transparent and really clear about like, this is the best we can do right now. Everything's anonymized. You have a chance to opt out and still participate in Mandela yoga and not have your data be collected. So that kind of conversation is some of what we're, it's really like kind of slow work of building trust. And I really appreciate the question.
It's iterative, and one of the ways we ensure that people participate is we ask them, what kinds of questions should we be asking in this survey? What are we missing that should be asked? And then in this upcoming pilot, for us, is very exciting that it's 2 6-week pilots. After the first 6-week pilot, with the provider, we will take their recommendations on how to alter the healthcare that's provided in the Mandela Yoga group medical visit setting. So if we're able to actually get the provider to change healthcare delivery, that'll be an example of patient voice being throughout the process, including the survey instruments themselves.
Wow, thank you, Jeffrey and Richa. Wow, we're already almost at time. It's 10:14. For participants, thank you all for being here. And we would love for you all to come and join our Community Power Network. Rachel has put the link in the chat, and she'll put that again. And so the Systems Alignment Innovation Hub Community Power Network centers Black, Brown, and Indigenous-led community-based organizations like you've seen today, and racially marginalized people and communities. But we also extend a warm embrace to all researchers, funders, and organizations working to or have a desire to dismantle systemic oppression by advancing health research innovation. And in the Community Power Network, we believe in building community power to uplift systems alignment approaches grounded in the lived and living experience and indigenous and cultural wisdom, community values and assets and culture. We also believe in conducting research that decolonizes and reimagines rigor to evaluate the feasibility or impact of system alignment innovations, and to leverage transdisciplinary expertise and other ways of knowing to accelerate practice, the translation of evidence into practical application and broad utilization. And my favorite, to create liberated spaces for emotional capacity building support, collective care, given the emotional toll caused by the work of dismantling systemic oppression. And so we have a monthly forum and a monthly community office hours. They're designed to serve both organizations new to systems alignment research and others that are further along with facilitation and just cross-pollination. So the link is in the chat. You all please spread the word so we can learn from each other. Let's give our fabulous grantees another round of applause, and I will turn it back over to Systems for Action. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, LaMont, and thank you so much for joining us to present the System Alignment Innovation Hub grantees. And thank you for joining in and listening to what these teams have planned. As I mentioned at the top of the hour, this is a two-part webinar series. So we will have our second part of the series next Wednesday, August 14th, and we hope to see you there. I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of their day.